And
Uh,
welcome to our panel. My name is Daniel Benkendorf, and I am an associate professor of psychology at the Fashion Institute of Technology. And I just wanted to quickly make a plug for our Sustainability Awareness Week programming that is occurring this week from October 4th to the 8th. There are a number of pre-recorded panels and talks and workshops that you can take advantage of, and all are freely available to you. Also, there are some live events that you can see on the schedule as well. So we're hoping to highlight a number of important movers and shakers in our own community to prompt greater learning and awareness of sustainability here on campus. But today, for this session, I'm very pleased to welcome Liz Breuer, who is the co-founder of New Normal Bureau. And she's a 2019 graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology. And the purpose of this session is just for us to learn a little bit about Liz's career and what she's done since she has graduated from FIT. And so we're calling this Building a Marketing Agency for the Planet. And I think it'll be really clear why once she tells you a little bit about what she's doing. So welcome, Liz.
Hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you. I thought maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and, the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, as you mentioned, I'm a 2019 graduate. I moved to New York for FIT. I'm originally from Luxembourg, tiny country in Europe. So I moved to New York in 2015 and ended up studying international trade and marketing at FIT, with minors in sustainability, math, and economics. And basically, like, long story short, after graduation, I've obviously worked in the industry throughout my years at FIT and also after. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, obviously things had to shift a little bit, and I decided to, together with my co-founder, launch New Normal Bureau, which is a purpose-driven marketing agency. And we exclusively focus on communication with purpose-driven / brands that are focused on sustainability. And the industries that we work with range from beauty, tech, fashion, obviously, just to name a few.
Excellent. Cool. So let's go back. Let's rewind a little bit. And I'd like to ask you what originally attracted you to FIT. Were you interested in the environment and sustainability all along, and that was part of what attracted you, or is that something you kind of discovered along the way?
Yeah, it's a question I get all the time. Like, what kind of got you interested in sustainability? I think growing up in Europe, the conversation or the narrative around sustainability is very much something that you're kind of born with. It's much more of a conversation. I grew up, my dad was one of the people that actually brought Greenpeace to Luxembourg. So he was very much in that movement when he was younger. And then, my mom is the kind of person that brings her 20 glass Tupperwares to the farmer's market, to not use any plastic. So I very much grew up in that kind of household without being too granola, I have to say. But that was kind of normal. And, but that said, when it came to sustainability related to fashion, I was very much, consuming and way more than I should, and going to Zara and H&M, etc. But it wasn't until I moved to New York where I felt like the conversation was it felt a lot more urgent, because it wasn't something that maybe was so used to in the daily narrative as it was maybe in Luxembourg. So when I moved here, and I actually, freshman year in 2015, took a class with Dr. Thien Charos. It was a physics class. And she, the first class, she talked about sustainability. And I didn't really know what that truly meant. And then she kind of framed, basically introduced us to the concept around sustainability and how it was relating to fashion and other industries. And I think that really just like I made a personal switch. And then, yeah, I think a year later, I completely like quit fast fashion. You know, I've been vegan also since I moved to New York, largely because of environmental reasons too. So everything just kind of like trickled down, and it gradually, the more I educated myself, whether I took, you know, in more classes around sustainability at FIT, also thanks to you, and then personally, you know, like read about it a ton and just got so immersed into it, and there's basically like no turning back at that point.
Yeah, so it sounds like very early in your college career, you encountered some things that, or at least some of your classes, where this was part of the conversation, but it wasn't the kind of thing where, you know, turns you away from the world of fashion. So you can retain that interest in creative things and the fashion world and all of its associates, while having the core values which you hold, which are to protect the environment. That's encouraging.
Because I just think the way, and that's what I really have to commend the faculty at FIT too, and just maybe the whole environment. It just felt like such an opportunity. It was very much like, you guys are the next generation. You guys are obviously interested in the fashion industry. You know, don't get turned away from like all the bad, because there is a lot of bad. See it as an opportunity to do better. And I think that felt very motivating and empowering.
Excellent. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
So turning away from kind of your shift, at least in the context of thinking about sustainable fashion, how do you think FIT prepared you to launch your own marketing agency, which you've done?
Yeah, I feel like FIT, the environment that I felt coming from like a really like regular Luxembourgish high school, which obviously like it's very different than high schools here, but you know, just to kind of compare where I came from, you know, a lot of people that were I basically was a math and physics major back in Luxembourg. And that was kind of like the path I was supposed to go on. And there was something in me that was like, no, I have to pursue my passion in New York. And like, so I kind of, you know, make a career switch there. But, you know, people were kind of like this linear, you know, I'm gonna get a good job, go to university, get a good job, and like kind of, you know, like kind of the rest of your life is very much set out to be. And I felt the environment, being at FIT, everyone around me was always working, whether it was professors that were working during the day and then, you know, having night classes, or students that were working during weekends, interning all the time, then being engaged in clubs. Like it just felt like a very self-starting environment, you know? And so that felt very, just kind of very like empowering. And then I eventually even launched my own blog. I think that kind of like started me putting my creative, you know, like vein to like a physical project. And that felt really fun. And that's kind of when I first introduced like different sustainability topics to an audience, if you will. But yes, I think also FIT being in the heart of New York City, that is in itself super, super inspiring. And I think there's honestly like no place like FIT or New York. And I feel like the two energies really fuse together. And it's really like that self-starting environment that I felt like I could really thrive in. But also I think intrinsically, like studying the industry, working in the industry through internships, seeing the many faults at hand, and just seeing an opportunity to do better. And I think that also was just, yeah, like kind of made me go and potentially like, yeah, eventually launch my own agency, and particularly marketing, because again, I have that marketing degree, and I felt most, I just felt like my analytical and creative side could kind of come together best in the marketing world.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like it's a combination of some of your personal traits, which are unique to you, but also being kind of thrown into this crucible of energy and excitement and rigor, really, you know, of New York City and FIT. So it's an interesting mix of factors. So maybe turning to a little bit more of um, I guess a challenging question, and that is, I have talked to more than a handful of FIT students who are majoring in advertising, marketing, communications, or maybe something related to the fashion industry. But in particular, in some of my classes, I get a lot of AMC students.
Mhm.
And sometimes they mention they kind of get to this place where they feel like that they're despairing, and they feel like there's nothing that I can do with this craft, which is a real skill, right? I mean, learning how to persuade people, learning how marketing works is a really, it's not easy. It's a skillful thing. It's effortful, but they hit this despair because they think that it's a force for destruction of the environment in particular, or for overconsumption. And so I've had conversations trying to kind of talk to students about that, and actually change their minds. But I'm wondering, what would you say to those students?
It's interesting because I've had this discussion, like I've had this internal dialogue as well, I would say, during my studies. I've had this conversation with fellow students as well. Like this is something that comes along, and even I've even met a lot of graduates from FIT, just being in New York and even working with them, and then finding out they went to FIT later, who've expressed a similar sentiment. And I think it really comes down to like knowing what you want to do and understanding how you can like basically use what you learn. And maybe the narrative in some classes could be better, where maybe some professors come from a different train of thought. So maybe the way they communicate it makes it feel a little bit harder for people who want to make a change in the advertising or marketing community to like process that. But I think, again, the more you're exposed to different kind of people and get inspired by that, I think, again, every class you take, you really get out of it what you put in. So if you, kind of enter with a mindset of, oh, this is all just like super destroying the environment and there's no way out, like, sure. But I think finding like your niche, which eventually, like, even today, I still have some kind of dialogue where I'm like, okay, I'm in the marketing world where essentially, like you said, I'm like, my job is to have a product that I'm like trying to get rid of basically and sell to people. So essentially it's perpetuating consumerism. But I think there you can have a bigger narrative that's like, okay, how can we make consumers? Because I think the reality is that a lot of people just have to realize is that the world is not going to stop consuming. And that's just the reality of it. We're not gonna like it. That's in an ideal world. Sure, we would all just, like stop consuming, but that's just not the reality. So how can we kind of use our superpowers, advertising, marketing, communications, whatever, for good? How can we align ourselves with, maybe the smaller players? And there are so many amazing creative talents who like use their crafts and their talents for good. So how can we kind of like merge and align ourselves with those people and amplify their craft with basically like our learnings as advertisers, as marketers? I think that's kind of like where I would hope that we can kind of like marry the two better, because maybe sometimes we're only being exposed to big players and the really like negative impacts that their actions have.
Yeah, I love how you described it as superpower, because I think of it that way as well. I think that as I was saying before, and you alluded to, this is something that organizations need a lot of help with. They hire people who specialize in marketing because it's a really important job to do, and I think that one of the things that I wonder what you think about this, but one of the things I always tell students is, you can choose where you want to work, and you can choose the projects that you want to support or not based on your values. But also, we really need people who can change industries. So as you said, the world is not going to stop consuming, but we can change maybe the way that conversation is had. We can change the ways that people consume, what they
Mhm.
consume, and all of that will be reliant still on those same skills that you learn as an advertising student or as a communication student. So I think it's really just a valuable skill that needs to be deployed, and then
Yeah.
you can deploy any skill in a way that is destructive, but it's
Yeah.
something that isn't always destructive. In fact, I think there are a lot of examples like what you're doing, that are really important ways of changing industries to make them more planet friendly.
Yeah, and it's not easy because again, in marketing, especially, I'm sure everyone who's watching has heard of the term greenwashing.
Yes.
So, and then you don't want to cross that line, because then again, that defeats the purpose. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of people using their superpowers um, for good, but only in a like for good, but actually for a bad. So
Yeah.
again, it's aligning ourselves with the right people, but also understanding that, like, I think there's a bigger conversation to be had, and I don't know if we want to dive into that even, but it's that individual action stops at one point, and that really comes from the consumer point of view, and like corporate responsibility, where does individual action end and where does corporate responsibility start? I think that's something that is a conversation I wish we had more. And as marketers, like, yes, if you're on the brand side, like, how can you kind of have those internal conversations to really, like, actually influence change, so that whatever you're doing outward facing to the consumer, you're not like perpetuating lies, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think that's well put. So, can you describe maybe a few interesting projects that your agency has worked on?
Yeah. So we've been in business for a year, so we're still, the new kids on the block. But we've been extremely fortunate to obviously like have a few amazing clients that we've worked with. Most notably, there's so many, but obviously since we're still in a pandemic, we haven't been able to like activate in person. So a lot of it that we're doing is, strategy work. And what's been really like fun about particularly doing strategy work is we work with a lot of startups, and whether they're like, a tech brand or a fashion brand or a beauty brand or whatever, it's like getting to see them being like from a baby that crawls to like slowly being able to walk, and like helping them kind of like navigate that and kind of show them, okay, this is how you eventually can amplify your product and your message to a wider audience. One really cool one, I mean, you've been involved with that, is Gen E. They're an incredible micro philanthropy app. So basically the point that they do, I mean, what they do is it's an app. It's basically like if Acorns and Venmo had a climate baby. I always
I love
that analogy, because it's like every transaction you take, like let's say you get coffee for $4, automatically 1% is being donated to an environmental nonprofit of your choosing. So we've been working on a lot of cool things with them, a lot of really exciting things happening now that the world is opening up again. So we're working on some out-of-home activations there that maybe you'll be seeing them around the city super soon, but can't share too much. It's been super exciting working on that. Then we have an amazing, like kind of like the first super transparent fragrance brand that we're coming up, that like we're helping to launch. So they have like a QR code in every single piece, so you can trace back to literally like where the flowers have been grown, which so far no fragrance brand has done in the past. So super clean, super transparent. So yeah, it's been a lot of moving parts, and we learn a ton working with these clients, but a lot of them again are in very like startup, pre-funding stages still, but a lot of exciting things are happening. So in the next few months, I'd say we have a lot of exciting updates.
That sounds really, really fun. I'm just the idea of getting to watch, as you described it, watching a new, a startup grow
Yeah.
through your efforts, right? Through the work that you're doing, you're helping these companies to grow. Sounds Sounds exciting. So because there are probably a lot of students watching, and probably a lot of advertising, marketing, and communication students watching, who might wonder what your day is like. Take us through a typical workday.
Typical work day. Obviously, we still work from home.
Yeah.
So it's, do we wish we had a fancy office? Obviously, but I think the reality of any startup is, especially in this, pandemic world, unfortunately, we're still in. Things are obviously different. But yeah, typically, so I have a co-founder, but she lives in Brooklyn. I'm in Manhattan, so we obviously don't see each other a ton. But typically, we wake up. I love to work out; just gets my brain going, especially when I have to be creative, especially. So that's typically like how I start every day. And then, it's a lot of computer work, a lot of meetings with potential clients. So a lot of like those kind of intro meetings that we have. So they're going to be happening on Zoom. And then honestly, it's like an insider joke between me and my co-founder Alina, where we pretty much built the company over WhatsApp, and we still like talk a ton over WhatsApp, just on like eternal things. And the day-to-day, obviously, since it is going to be a lot of computer work, it does depend. Some of it is going to be more operational. I kind of take that role of like everything, business ops, administrative work, email work, client relations, that's me. And then there's other days where I just have to be like, super creative, get into like, mode of literally like doing some graphic design. Like, since we are only 2 people right now, we really have to like do everything. But so yeah, every day varies. But in a sense, it's still like most of it is in computer. And then obviously sometimes we have shoot days. That's fun when we get to go out. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds busy, but in an engaging way, not in a mundane way. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me then, what are your goals for New Normal Bureau over the next few years?
Yeah, so obviously right now we're a marketing agency, and I get a question a lot. Okay, you're a purpose-driven marketing agency. Like, what exactly do you guys even do? Right now we're focusing on marketing services, right? So like strategy, content creation, community building, but it's all under the realm of purpose-driven initiatives, sustainable brands, etc. Ideally, we would love to grow into an agency that could help brands really like launch from the ground up and really like influence them throughout their entire supply chain, right? Like help them. For example, if it's a fragrance brand, like where can we source your ingredients so that they're, the best possible ones? How can you, maybe work with AI and blockchain technology to make your company even more transparent? How can you, maybe if you're a fashion brand, you're launching a product, like what suppliers or where should you produce to, make the most out of your brand? Like, I think that would be super cool, being the middleman, if you will, just like, yeah, making brands as sustainable as possible, and potentially also going into more the digital realm, and I think positioning ourselves, Normal Bureau, as kind of thought leaders in the industry, maybe having conferences, YouTube channels, like sharing our knowledge of just how can you use marketing for good, as you say, because I think it's a conversation that needs a little bit, maybe a different voices attached to it. And then lastly, this is something that I've always been super passionate about, and having worked in the industry in fashion for a while before, it's just creating a genuinely fun company that people want to work at. Like, for me, it's super important to create a working environment that not only feels empowering for employees to work at, but it really like celebrates them and listens to them. Because I think right now, unfortunately, there's still a very, very toxic work environment that exists within the fashion world and agency world, and I just think it's not productive. So yeah, that's something really important to both of us.
I think that those are laudable goals, and I think I think you're going to do it. I can tell. Um, so, what would you say? What would you say has been the most challenging thing about starting your own business? And what is, I guess it's a part B to that. What is challenging about working in marketing?
Yeah, I mean, so I said we launched the agency last year in 2020 when everyone was freezing their marketing budgets. So,
Right.
like I said, being the new kids on the block in marketing during a pandemic was not the easiest because people were like, yeah, I mean, we like great what you're doing, but also we don't have the budget for it, right? I
Yeah.
think that's an ongoing problem that you're dealing with. Also, being in New York, it's a very competitive landscape. So, but essentially, I think what was for us really important is that we had that niche of like, we exclusively work with purpose-driven brands. And a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from potential clients or even clients that we have right now is, well, I've never wanted to work with an agency because they just felt so, maybe they had like hundreds of clients and they just dedicated the minimum amount of time. And like we've actually experienced that we had to do a lot of counseling and therapy to like other clients because they were like, oh, all agencies are bad and they just, treated us bad and whatever. So it's like,
Yeah.
no, we're
Yeah.
different. You can trust us, So it's been a lot of like consulting people.
Yeah.
So I think that's like kind of answering like the part B of your question
Yeah.
of like working in marketing, but again, having that kind of North Star and like kind of doing everything under that has been super important. And now you see the conversation has grown tremendously over the past year around sustainability and being, consuming more mindfully. So I think it's been like the perfect time where we started, and obviously like continuously we're building ourselves to be thought leaders in that. And then obviously the most challenging starting an agency, I mean, this was both of us, was the first business that we ever created. So, and I didn't study entrepreneurship. So for me, it was a lot of Googling, like, how do you set up? I mean, I'm going to be very transparent about it. I had to like look things up and with limited resources, I was not going to hire a lawyer. So we figured it out how to do everything on our own. And we did have someone to help us with our logo because that was important to us. But the rest, like very scrappy, and we just kind of, figured it out. So being honestly, like we just have to be patient and still are to this day, obviously, since it's only been a year. But yeah, Google is your best friend when in doubt.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all addicted to our Google searches, but I think that it's maybe you're also I think one of the features that I noticed with a lot of FIT students is that you also kind of have a resilience. I mean, I not everyone obviously, but there's and persistence. I think those two traits are things that I saw in you as a student, but I see in a lot of our students actually, that we can people feel like they can really push past their obstacles. And I think that's, and that I think comes back to what we were talking about early on about, what an education is for and how FIT prepares. Yeah. I think one of the things that we, that's our job as educators, as an educational institution, is to help students know how to find information and how to find good information and how to teach themselves and where to find that sort of credible, whether it's looking up, legal regulations for starting a new business or how to find a good graphic designer. I think all of that is something that shifts over time. And so you have to be an adaptable, flexible person, right? So we have to try to teach that. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's honestly like working in fashion. It's a very tough industry.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be beaten down and then you have to kind of like find your way up again. And I think that probably makes people at FIT so resilient because you're just used to this super tough environment.
Yeah. I guess maybe a last question for you. What kind of general advice or maybe specific advice do you have for current FIT students?
honestly, what helped me really is what I mentioned earlier of like, you really like entering a classroom, having the mindset of really like absorbing everything, being like a sponge, like you get out of it what you put in. So I feel like, the more engaged you are in class, the more questions you ask, you're really getting out of it the most possible value, right? Like, I mean, people who are paying to be at FIT, like why not, use all the education and the knowledge you're getting there to your full advantage. So I think that has been super helpful, connecting with professors even after the classroom, getting to understand them, because so many have this amazing experience. Either they, have worked in the industry, they are working, just this knowledge that like, why not? You're there for 4 years, right? Or 2 to 4 years, depending on how long you're there. Make the most out of it. With that, also, networking is everything. So like I said, not only for professors, your peers, and then FIT, what I really liked, gives you the ability to have a very flexible schedule. So you are able, like, I think it really encourages people to intern or to work outside of the classroom. And that has been, honestly, for me at least, tremendous. I've had 6 or 7 internships before I graduated, every semester, like learning something new, building a network there in New York that still comes in handy today. Like a lot of them, I've sought out after, especially in the past year, and they've all been like a tremendous help. So I think that is super important, like network, like really use that to your advantage. Attend events, be a member of clubs, don't be afraid to talk to people. Everyone's probably going to be in the same situation as you. And also, I think a lot of people at FIT, maybe they feel like their major defines what they can do later with their job, or like their career. And it really, I think it really much is it's a guideline, and you can later on choose, what you want to do. If you have a marketing degree, by all means, like you said, you can still, you don't have to work at a firm, right? You can do your own thing, and you don't have to, study entrepreneurship for that. But yeah, and also, like, again, like you said, like be resilient and never give up, to be honest, because we're all gonna figure it out eventually.
Yeah. That sounds like great advice. Well, Liz, this has been a lot of fun. It's been great to see you, and I think you've offered a lot of kind of a window into your life and kind of the things that you've been up to, that will help inspire some of our current students, and given them some, kind of a picture of what life may be like when they graduate. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it too.